It all comes down to it. You have to make that commitment. If you're going to be focused on growth, you got to have somebody on your team that's their focus.
I really wish I didn't have to make that decision, but judges that want you there tomorrow at 9, I just didn't really want to do that anymore.
Can you tell everybody, before we get started here, can you tell everybody a little bit about your law firm? What's your practice area? How many employees do you have? Where are you located? Maybe if you're comfortable sharing your revenue story, all those types of things, whatever you can share with everybody to kind of give you a good picture of where you are.
Sure. Yeah, we're a plaintiff's firm, which means we represent solely individuals as opposed to companies. We do them primarily in the class action space based here in Dallas, Texas. Okay. Our legislature has just made it really hard to do what we do. So I'm probably a little bit crazy. I credit a lot of our success to my business partner, to, groups like Andrews that just help us acquire all of our cases. And maybe because there's so few people in Texas that can do what we do, that probably contributed to some of the ranking.
Awesome. Dan, are you ready now?
So I'm the CEO and founder of Puget Law Group. We are based in Tacoma, Washington. We have 6 locations throughout the Puget Sound area, which is Western Washington. We primarily do DUI and criminal defense. We also do personal injury. That is an area of practice that right now is probably about 10% of what we do, but we've been ramping that up with marketing, and we expect that, and our goal is by the end of next year that's at least 30% of our gross revenue. I was feeling pretty good about our growth until I took a look and saw where Jay's firm landed last year in the 140 or whatever. That's astounding. We've been on there 3 years in a row. I think the first year right around 768. The second year 960, and this year 1,300. So hanging in there year after year is definitely a goal of ours. And last year our gross revenue was about $7.5 million. We're shooting for 9 figures this year. It's leveled off a bit, but we've had growth every year since I started back in 2013, and especially in the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. That's awesome. I think that there's a lot of attorneys that they operate as the lawyer first rather than the business owner. Can you talk a little bit about kind of how you approach that mindset and how that's impacted your firm?
From 2013, I'd say for about 4 or 5 years, I wore every hat. I was a solo. As I grew, I had a legal assistant. I hired my first attorney. Then I hired a second one, and now I've got a staff of about 6 total, and I'm doing everything. And for me, that's just unsustainable. It was the sort of growth that it required me to do all of that, but it didn't allow me to focus on the growth. Right around 2018, I made the decision to hire an attorney who was more experienced than me in criminal defense, somebody who had a very strong reputation, was very well known. And I knew that I could just give that attorney the cases and feel confident that he was going to take care of them. And then that's where I kind of started focusing on the business rather than in the business. I weigh in on the things that are important, and I try to stay out of the stuff that is better left to other people doing, which is most everything. My goal is to only do the stuff that only I can do.
That's perfect. Jay, how do you approach that? Because, you and I haven't really had that conversation before, but are you the one who does all the work, or do you have people underneath you, or what is your take on CEO versus lawyer versus law firm owner?
I would describe it much like Dan. I think he really summarized it well. Some specific things I'll add is that I refer to myself on documents, attorney owner. I have on my business card team member, because I took that from Target, and I thought that was really cool. And one of our cultural things is although we're a law firm, we try and everything we do for attorneys, we try and do for staff members as well. Yeah. I would add that part of my transition to that is, I guess 2 things: becoming a father and thinking about just really the kind of dad I wanted to be. Unfortunately, I reached the decision that litigation, and particularly in federal court, was not conducive to really the kind of schedule I wanted to have. And that is what it is. I really wish I didn't have to make that decision, but judges that want you there tomorrow at 9, I just didn't really want to do that anymore. So that really impacted our decision to to scale. And then I'd also say that as I held on to cases, it became harder because my priority has to be to my employees. Mm-hmm. And I will just admit, on a civil case, you start to kind of run into some boundaries that I wasn't very comfortable with of, hey, this is a case where I can settle it now and it can produce this amount of revenue. I think I have to make that decision. But if the client, wants to go in a different direction, so that's something that I don't know if Dan's thought about, but I think that it can get real murky if you're wearing both hats. And so over the last year, I've transitioned to where I'm primarily wearing more of like a finance management hat than an attorney hat.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. That's actually a really interesting take that I haven't heard other attorneys talk about, is when you have to make a decision as a business owner and then as an attorney. And sometimes those decisions are conflicting. That's actually a really interesting take that I hadn't heard. Thanks for sharing that. And I want to ask both of you guys, a lot of times I'll hear from lawyers like, I'm just not ready. I don't know that I'm ready. I don't know that other people can handle my casework. I don't know that I can delegate, or they don't believe that. Like, how do you feel about that? And how did you guys feel when you kind of had to make that decision?
I guess it depends, because I'll be perfectly honest. I didn't love the practice of law. I didn't mind it, but I didn't love it. And I know that a lot of attorneys love it. That's where they want to be. And that's going to be more difficult for somebody like that, because you can't really do anything halfway. And what I find, that I have to be careful of is, because I've now been out of full-time, case work practice for probably 2 to 3 years, I'm a little bit behind on things, and I only take cases when I know everything there is to know about this. But the reality is, everybody on my team should be doing what they are best at. Practice of law is not what I'm best at anymore. And there are other people on my team that are better at it than me. And so it all comes down to it. You have to make that commitment. If you're going to be focused on growth, you got to have somebody on your team that's their focus, and that they're not distracted by something else. And if that's you, then you have to make that decision. You have to commit to it and follow through on it, I think.
Absolutely. What do you think, Jay?
It is scary. It's definitely scary. And I think when we first started, we thought, I have to have X amount of someone's paycheck. Because as I said, my employees are my priority. When you hire someone, you don't just hire the person, you hire their family. That's a real responsibility. But I think what's true is that usually when you start to think that I need to hire someone, you probably were actually there a few months ago. Whereas some people have the mindset of, I want to work people till they can't work another hour, and then that's when I'm going to hire. But one thing that I think we've done really well is we hire for fit as opposed to hire for need. I guess the fortunate experience that I worked at a firm that had a revolving door. They were hiring for need all the time. They were hiring off of Craigslist. And I couldn't help but just say, you're losing so much money in the cost of training up new people. And I think that's probably something that we do, I think, pretty well, is not just look at the revenue side, but look at the cost side. I'm a lot more interested in just preserving our profitability margin as opposed to just the revenue. You can have $100 million in revenue, but if you're spending $200 million, who cares?
What is your guys' philosophy in terms of hiring? What is your thoughts on hiring? I know, Jay, we touched on this a little bit, but I was wondering if you can maybe go a little deeper in that and kind of, what do you look for in employees? I know you mentioned culture. So culture is actually obviously really big for your firm, but how do you attract them? How do you keep them happy? Just talk to me a little bit about kind of how you guys manage that whole thing. Go ahead, Jay.
I think picking up with what you talked about, at the very beginning, we could only afford to pay so much, but over the years, I've recognized exactly what you're talking about is, we started to look for experienced lateral hires, and that's made all the difference. When we first started hiring people, our interview was largely what we called the fire question. We would pose to people and say, and as a law firm, we'd ask every single person, you're in your house, it's 2 a.m. What are 3 things that you take with yourself out of the door? And we were literally just looking for one example of selflessness. And we're in a very prideful field. It's very important to be thoughtful. But I think just having people that, teasing that out, that they have just something that's selfless, that they care about, that's bigger than themselves or even money, helped us get a core group of really good staff people, and some law students that we had through law school and are now associates. And then we've balanced that out by adding laterals of people that we just knew were good people.
What about you, Dan?
Well, and I don't know what laws are in Texas or where you're at, Andy. I know in Washington, I think you're not allowed to ask questions like, do you have kids? Are you married? Things like that. And which is too bad, because you would never know, what those answers meant until you get the answer to that question. If you've got somebody who's single and doesn't have any pets, then that's a reasonable answer maybe, versus, but I guess you go off of a lot of different things. That's a great question. I have a Google document sheet that is our hiring protocol that I constantly update. And I updated it the other day, last week, when I watched the one that that SMB hosted. There was some great stuff that came out of there that I now have incorporated into our hiring mix, and that's going to be something else. I'll have my culture person who asks the questions along those lines. I'll have her throw that question out. I really like that. For us, it's the biggest challenge that we have, and it's ongoing. And I was at the summit that you guys had last month, that, as you were saying, and I distinctly remember Bill asking who here believes that it's tough to find the right talent, and most of the hands went up. My hand went up, and his response, I think, was, go ahead and keep thinking that. So I'm like, okay, he's got something to say. And everything that he said from that point, I took note of it, and I believe that he's right. I think I've got it down when it comes to the marketing stuff. Not nearly as much when it comes to like the team building. We're certainly a lot better now than we were 2 years ago, but culture is everything, for sure.